In Easter Island, the past is the present. It is impossible to escape from it. The inhabitants of today are less real than the men who have gone. The shadows of the departed builders still possess the land. Voluntarily or involuntarily, the sojourner must hold commune with those old workers, for the whole air vibrates with a vast purpose and energy, which has been and is no more. What was it? Why was it? Mrs. Catherine Rappledge, 1919.
It's so small, so delicate, so beautiful. It's such a famous little spot in the world, and so simplistic. So there's nothing there that I could offer that is fantastically beautiful. But the people that live there, the rocks, the stone, is just another phenomenon. But the tradition itself.
Rapa Nui. Itiroa happy roa matu timene. Mo hakatero rau e te hinua. Amu akahoa. Uira. Matu ni o torani happy ni te ngapu. E mana uroa. Ki te ngapu kena pore kore ko kohuma iena pe mua. Mo mau o raua. I te tumu I te aka. O te arera mauhi. Mau. I te me o te huri tupuna, o te tupuna I hakare mai nei te auha nei he o one nei ko te henua ni ko Rapa Nui. Ani ngaora he moai. E tatu ni e oho nei. Pe mua o ngaro. Tatu hauha nei. He moai he henua Rapa Nui.
What most important is let the people think themselves. And outsiders shouldn't tell them what to do. We probably have been doing that for a long time. But the time changed now. We can give some advice or consultation if they want. But they are the ones who have to think themselves what to do about it. And we cannot push them. And that's why I'm waiting 30 years to let the people to think. It's ridiculous. Last 30 years I was saying same thing to Tahitian people. To let's preserve your cultural heritage. But didn't pay a damn, give a damn about it. Only recently they start thinking about it. So that the Easter Islanders themselves think about what to do their cultural heritage. If they don't care, too bad, but we cannot tell them what to do. We can, as I said, we can help them. So that the public education is very important.
Language is most important for me, is education. Without it, my children would not know what was and what would be what it is for them. It's a great culture, and I think it's a supreme culture in terms for the humanity to know. And it is up to the caretakers, the people that live there, to carry on that culture into the future.
Polynesian cultures are basically oral. You have oral tradition, you recite by heart. Here on Easter Island you have the Rongorongo tablets, but again only known to a very limited group of people. So by bringing in texts that are now written in their own language, well, you first have to teach how to read and write the language to the islanders. And in many cases you find that television is more overpowering than the written word. You like to see and listen. You don't like to see and have to read. In fact, you will find that in many cases when somebody is reading a book in the company of others, this is considered something very negative. You show that you do not want to talk. So books really are not something that would fit into a typical house of an islander.
I had the most beautiful childhood anyone could possibly imagine on earth, being raised in a very gorgeous environment. I'd like to see that Rapa Nui maintain that for the sake of the future for the kids, to have the same experience as I did as a young child, being extremely happy from a beautiful, loving Polynesian style family.
Teaching minority peoples to read and write, one of the big factors to think about is the motivation. And we didn't find too much difficulty for the children learning to read and write. There was a real enthusiasm to see their own words that they spoke at home written on the pages. But up through the actual mechanics of learning the syllables of their language and reading and writing, but the motivation drops when there's no literature to practice on at home. That was in part the motivation for our doing writers' workshops, was to produce literature so that there would be a reason for the children to learn to read and write, because there's something out there to read afterwards. But to try to get this motivation out on the adult level, many of the parents of the children know how to read and write in Spanish, but reading has never been, for the majority, something that has ever been incorporated into their lifestyle. They don't read. And the hope was that having material in their own language, written by their own people who would hopefully write things that would interest their own people, would be a motivating factor. And some have really enjoyed reading, but I don't think that it has been as broadly accepted as we would like to see it.
I wanted to learn English because I want to speak with the other person that speak English.
For the people here that live in the island, the natives here, for them it's very important to get in contact, to talk to other persons in their language, because the people here are very intelligent first. They're very, very special in learning. I am really surprised because in the continent it's not that. Probably because they are more in contact with tourists that come here. Don't forget that this is a kind of area museum which is exposed to everybody that comes here. So for them, their language cannot be taught to anyone, but they can learn easily, quickly, and they can communicate with others in their own language. I mean, if you come from France, they want to speak to you in French, and they do. They do that, and it's very easy for them to learn. They mostly talk German, French, English, and Spanish as a second language. Spanish most.
Y me gustaría volver ahora a ese tiempo, para volver para atrás. Bueno, desgraciadamente nuestros hijos se fueron a estudiar afuera. Tenemos que estar con ellos, o sea, seguir el camino de ellos, el adelante. Bueno, digo que la vida antes es mucho mejor, 100% mejor que ahora.
So we go away to be educated. Population on the island is still under 2,000. So one life is big loss for Rapa Nui. I am one of those children that went away and was purposely sent to be educated abroad and to learn from the external world and bring back and share with people. Sort of a witness, an eye to the world, mata kite.
We believe that the origin of Easter Island Polynesian stock came either from the Marquesas Islands and or perhaps from the society, or from both. And it evolved as a Polynesian society, undoubtedly, with the Polynesian cultures, language, and art manifestation, etc. We have to acknowledge that there has been scholars during the last 50 years, perhaps, or more, that have advocated the possibility that from the American continent, people have moved into the Pacific, either from the northwest of North America, even Central America or Mesoamerican area, and South America in particular, from Peru. And I think there is a real possibility of contact between American cultures and the Pacific or the Polynesian cultures. What we're not sure of is that which is the direction that this contact took place. Is this a Polynesian that continued navigating until it hit South America, and then they return home and bring with them some ideas, some tools, some plans? Or they are American Indians from different places of the American Pacific coast that have adventured into the Pacific and landed in places like Hawaii, or landed in places like Raiatea, or Marquesas, or Easter Islands.
What was of great interest to me was the totora reed, which again is a fresh water plant, and botanists know that it has a South American origin. It is growing in the lakes in the highland like Titicaca spontaneously, and it was one of the most important cultivated plants all along the desert coast of Peru, where the islanders cultivated it because it was their principal material for boat building, beside the balsa logs, which they brought from Ecuador. The totora was found in great quantities on Easter Island when the first Europeans came there, and it grew in the crater lakes of the island. The totora is very difficult to transplant except by rootstock, and a man has to carry the root. You can, but with great difficulty, plant the seeds, and it may come up from the seed. But there is no way for a totora seed to go from the cultivated area on the coast of Peru and fall down into the crater lakes on Easter Island. Also, the traditional history of Easter Island makes it very clear that the plants were brought to the island by man. And what makes it particularly interesting is that the Easter Islanders used this reed precisely like the ancient Peruvians for building the very same type of reed boats. Both the little, which we used to call the caballito de totora on the coast of Peru, and the big one with the 2 points, which could be used for ocean navigation. They repeated exactly what was done here.
The one thing I have been saying that's more romantic, maybe, thinking that when you think of Polynesians, they have skill to build such ocean-going canoes. They know how to navigate. They know how to preserve food, how they can carry plants or animals from island to the other. Then one day you're sitting on the beach looking horizon and a migratory bird just flying in. When I was working in the Marquesas in November, you know, the villagers are very excited because first bird arrived, about 3 birds. Next day 5, next day about 12, next day, you know, many migratory birds coming in from north. Then when it comes about May or June, the migratory bird coming up from New Zealand side, from south. When the Polynesians look at them, okay, if the birds coming flying in, there must be island or some land there over the horizon, yeah? And do you think the Polynesians just sit tight on the beach? I don't think so.
Everybody have a hope for the future, for better futures for the children, for the grandchildren, for the coming generation. And as you look on a small island like Easter Island, and perhaps one of the most fascinating things to me is that small island is a microcosm example of what is happening in the planet today. How this Polynesian society evolved in almost a complete isolation, and how it changed socially, and how it changed its environment, and how their interrelationship with the environment have posed limitations to many aspects of further development. And one of them, for example, is that the wood was cut off from the islands, and no larger forests remain to have wood to build a canoe and go even beyond the island. We have, conscious or unconsciously, been destroying our planet. So we need to run away. And unfortunately, in the case of Easter Island as an example, it was not possible to run away. They destroyed what they had built before. Cannibalism took place. Rejection for what was before. The interrelationship between countries is more and more, as we're seeing today. When the people fish in the Pacific with the unappropriated kind of nets that will destroy the fauna of the Pacific, we all get concerned. So there is definitely different orders, a different way of relationship that we are facing today in the planet. Well, in the past, on that small island, this model was already shown. So when I look into the future for hope, the hope is to not be blind for what is going on around, to not be so narrowed and uni-minded, but rather open and be more and more sensitive to the ecological reality where we exist. We have exaggerated our need, like the boosting status of Easter Islands, that they make bigger and bigger and bigger until they run out of time, resource, and people, and they have to abandon it, and we just have to be like in a silent city. I would like to see a futures of humanity more sensitive to each one of these issues, less energy intensive, because ultimately it's energy that we're pulling together to please our exaggeration, perhaps, could drive our planet to a similarity with Easter Island in the past.
He wari mai ki hanga rau, ti ka ki hanga ro tai. Haka te ka he o, ki roto I te ana kai tangata. He wari mai ki ana kena, haka titi ka ki hangaroa. Hea o te wae, e te ki oho ki ana kai tangata. E mo te mau mai kupuna, pe mua ka ohoena. Mo maua au, ki te akara o te tupuna.